Day 14, 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. I'm sitting in the campus cafeteria. My laptop is open. My biology notes are right there in front of me, but I'm not studying. I'm staring at the screen. My hands are shaking, and I realize something terrifying. I can't make it through lunch without thinking about it. Not my dorm room at midnight, not alone in the dark, right here. In public, surrounded by people. That's when it hit me. I wasn't fighting an addiction anymore. I had become the addiction. My name is Alex, and 6 months ago, I was failing out of college. Not because I was dumb. Not because the work was too hard. But because every single night, I made a choice. A choice that seemed small in the moment, but it was killing my future. One click at a time. Carl Jung once said something that destroyed me when I first read it. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." I thought I was just unlucky. I thought I was weak. I thought this was just who I was, but Jung was right. I wasn't aware of what was actually controlling me. My shadow self. The part of me I refused to look at. The part one was too ashamed to admit existed. This video is different from everything else you've seen. I'm not going to tell you to just use willpower. I'm not going to give you some generic advice about cold showers and blocking websites. Because I tried all of that, and it failed. Every single time, what I'm going to share with you is what actually worked. A 21-day system that's based on how your brain actually functions, not how we wish it functioned. But first, let me tell you why you're really here. You've tried to quit before. Maybe 10 times, maybe 100 times, and make it 2 days. Maybe a week if you're lucky. Then something happens. Stress, boredom, a bad grade. A fight with someone, and suddenly you're back to square one. And the shame hits you like a truck. You feel disgusting, weak, pathetic. You promise yourself this is the last time. But deep down, you don't believe it anymore. Here's what nobody tells you. The reason you keep failing isn't because you lack discipline. It's because you're fighting the wrong battle. Robert Greene teaches us in the laws of power that you must know your enemy. But most people don't even understand what they're fighting against. They think they're fighting lust. They think they're fighting temptation. But that's not the real enemy. The real enemy is something called the Coolidge Effect. It's a biological drive that exists in almost every mammal on Earth. Scientists discovered it by accident. They put a male rat in a cage with a female rat. The rats would mate. Then the male rat would lose interest. He was done, satisfied. But then the scientists did something interesting. They introduced a new female rat into the cage. And suddenly, the male rat was interested again, not because he was still horny, but because the female was new, novel, different. Your brain is wired for novelty. It's wired to seek out new experiences, new stimulation. And the internet has hijacked this ancient biological drive. Every click gives you something new. Every video is different from the last. Your brain gets a hit of dopamine, not from the content itself, but from the newness, the novelty, the endless variety. You're not addicted to lust. You're addicted to novelty, and that changes everything. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Most people try to quit by focusing on the how. How do I stop? How do I resist? How do I block the websites? But they never ask why. Why do I actually want to quit? And I don't mean surface level reasons. I don't mean to get better grades or to feel less guilty. I mean deep, bone-crushing, can't sleep at night reasons. For me, the real why came during that midterm I failed. I studied for 3 days straight. Or at least I thought I did. But when I looked back at my screen time, the truth was ugly. I spent 18 hours studying, but my phone was unlocked 247 times. My browser history showed the real story. I wasn't studying. I was fighting urges, giving in, feeling guilty, trying to refocus, getting distracted again. The cycle never ended, and my brain was so fried from the dopamine roller coaster that nothing was sticking. The information just slid off my brain like water off glass. I walked out of that exam knowing I failed. Not because I didn't know the material, but because my brain was too damaged to recall it. That's when I understood something Jordan Peterson talks about. He says, "You're not everything you could be, and you know it." I knew I was capable of more. I knew I was smarter than my grades showed. I knew I had potential, but I was choosing to waste it every single night. For what? 15 minutes of pleasure followed by hours of shame? That night, I didn't go back to my old patterns. Instead, I did something different. I got brutally honest with myself. I grabbed a notebook and I wrote down everything. Not just, I want to quit, but why I was really doing this. What I was running from, what I was trying to escape, and what I saw on those pages made me sick. I was using lust as an escape from pressure, from expectations, from the fear of failure. Every time I had a hard assignment due, I would procrastinate by giving in to urges. Every time I felt anxious about the future, I would numb myself with pixels on a screen. Sigmund Freud called this the pleasure principle, the idea that humans are driven to seek pleasure and avoid pain. But what I was doing wasn't actually giving me pleasure anymore. It was just helping me avoid the pain of facing my real problems. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." I had been giving my power away, to websites, to urges, to dopamine. I had convinced myself that I was powerless, that this was just something that happened to me. But Aurelius was right. The only thing I could control was my mind, my response, my choice. That's when I decided to create the 21-day system. Not because 21 days is some magic number. It's not. The idea that habits form in 21 days is actually a myth. Real habit change takes much longer, but 21 days is long enough to break the immediate cycle, to prove to yourself that you can do it, to rewire the most urgent pathways in your brain. Think of it as a sprint, not the whole race, just the first crucial mile. Before I break down the 3 phases of this system, you need to understand one more thing. This isn't going to be easy. Anyone who tells you it will be easy is lying to you. There will be moments where you want to quit, where the urges feel unbearable, where you convince yourself that one time won't hurt. But here's what I learned from Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was once a slave. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Every time you give in, you're choosing slavery. Slavery to your impulses, to your shadow self, to the weakest version of who you are. Are you ready to become free? Then let's begin. Phase 1 is called the shadow integration, and it lasts 7 days. This is where most people fail, because they try to fight their urges with willpower alone. But Carl Jung teaches us something different. He says, what you resist persists. The more you fight against your shadow, the stronger it becomes. So instead of fighting, we're going to do something that sounds crazy. We're going to integrate it. Let me explain what this actually means. Your shadow self is the part of you that you've been trying to hide. The part that wants instant gratification. The part that clicks on things you know you shouldn't. The part you're ashamed of. Most people try to kill this part of themselves, to destroy it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But Jung discovered that this approach always fails because you can't destroy a part of yourself. You can only transform it. Here's what you're going to do on day 1. You're going to have a conversation with your shadow self. I know this sounds weird, but stay with me. Find a quiet place, grab your journal, and write a letter from your shadow self to your conscious self. Let your shadow speak. Don't judge it. Don't censor it. Just let it talk. When I did this exercise, my shadow said things that terrified me. It said, "You use me to escape. You use me to feel powerful when you feel weak. You use me to numb the pain of not being good enough." And then it said something that broke me. "You hate me, but I'm just trying to protect you. I'm just trying to help you survive." This is the key insight. Your shadow isn't evil. It's not trying to destroy your life. It's actually trying to help you. It just doesn't know a better way. It learned that dopamine hits make pain go away. So every time you feel stress, it offers you the only solution it knows. Nietzsche understood this. He wrote, "There are no moral phenomena at all, only a moral interpretation of phenomena. Your urges aren't good or bad. They're just your brain trying to solve a problem. Once you understand this, everything changes. You stop fighting yourself, and you start working with yourself. On day 2, you're going to identify your 3 biggest triggers. Not generic triggers like being alone or being bored, specific triggers. The exact sequence of events that leads to a relapse. For me, trigger 1 was checking my grades. Every time I saw a bad grade, I would feel this wave of shame and anxiety, and within 30 minutes I would relapse. Trigger 2 was my roommate leaving the dorm. The moment I heard the door close, my brain would start. It knew we were alone. Trigger 3 was Sunday nights. Something about the week ending and a new week starting made me anxious, and I would use lust to cope. Arthur Schopenhauer said, "Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." In other words, you can control your actions, but you can't always control your desires. So don't try to control the urge. Control the environment that creates the urge. This is where most advice fails. People tell you to be strong, to resist temptation. But willpower is a limited resource. It runs out. Environment design is unlimited. Here's what I did. For trigger 1, I changed how I checked grades. Instead of checking alone in my room, I only checked grades in the library. In public, where relapsing wasn't even an option. For trigger 2, I created a rule. When my roommate left, I immediately put on my shoes and went to a public space. Coffee shop, library, student center, anywhere but alone in my room. For trigger 3, I started a Sunday night routine. I called my accountability partner at exactly 8 p.m. every Sunday. Just knowing that call was coming made the urge manageable. Day 3 through 7 is about building what I call the boredom tolerance. This is going to sound strange, but boredom is your greatest weapon. Most people think boredom is the enemy. They think urges come from boredom, so they try to stay busy. They fill every moment with podcasts, music, social media, anything to avoid silence. But this is backwards. Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." He was right. You relapse not because you're bored, but because you can't handle being bored. You've trained your brain to expect constant stimulation. So the moment you feel understimulated, your brain panics, and it reaches for the strongest stimulation it knows. The solution isn't more stimulation. It's learning to sit with boredom. On day 3, you're going to do something radical. You're going to sit in a room with nothing. No phone. No music, no books, nothing. Just you and a wall. For 20 minutes, I'm serious, set a timer. Sit down and do nothing. The first time I did this, I lasted 4 minutes before I wanted to climb out of my skin. My brain was screaming at me. It was throwing every urge, every thought, every distraction it could find at me. But I sat there, and something magical happened. Around minute 12, my brain gave up. It realized I wasn't going to give in, and the urges just faded. Not forever. But for that moment, I won. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The urge isn't the problem. Your inability to sit with discomfort is the problem. So you train yourself. Every day you sit for 20 minutes. By day 7, you'll be able to sit with boredom, with discomfort, with urges, and they won't control you anymore. Now let's talk about what you're going to replace the behavior with, because here's the truth. You can't just remove a habit. You have to replace it. Machiavelli teaches us in The Prince that nature abhors a vacuum. If you create empty space in your life, something will fill it. Either you choose what fills it, or your shadow will choose for you. I replaced my nightly ritual with something called the victory hour. From 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night, I did something that made me feel powerful. Not productive, powerful. There's a difference. Productivity is doing homework. Power is doing something that reminds you that you're in control. For me, it was working out, doing push-ups until my arms shook, running until my lungs burned, writing in my journal about who I was becoming. Jordan Peterson talks about how men need to feel dangerous. Not dangerous to others, but dangerous in the sense that they're capable, that they have agency, that they can change their reality. When you spend your nights escaping into pixels, you feel weak, powerless, pathetic. The victory hour was my way of reclaiming that sense of power. By the end of week 1, something shifts. You're not cured. The urges are still there. But you've proven something to yourself. You've proven that you can sit with discomfort, that you can identify your triggers, that you can talk to your shadow instead of fighting it. You've completed the hardest part, the detox. Your brain is starting to reset. The dopamine receptors are beginning to heal. You're ready for phase 2. But before we move on, I need to warn you about something. Day 5 or 6 is when most people relapse. Not because the urges are strongest, but because they start to feel confident. They think they've got this. So they get careless. They check their phone in bed. They browse websites they shouldn't. They tell themselves they're just looking. And then boom, relapse. Don't let this be you. Stay vigilant, especially on days 5 and 6. The war isn't over. You've just won the first battle. Phase 2 is called the identity shift, days 8 through 14. This is where everything I'm about to teach you comes together. Because the truth is, you can white-knuckle your way through 21 days. You can use blockers and accountability and all the tricks. But if you don't change your identity, you'll relapse on day 22, or day 30, or day 60. Robert Greene says, "The greatest power you can have is the power to reinvent yourself." That's what phase 2 is about, becoming someone new. Here's the question that changed my life. It's from James Clear, but it echoes what the ancient Stoics taught. Don't ask, what do I want to achieve? Ask, who do I want to become? Because the person you are right now relapses. That's just what you do. It's part of your identity. You've told yourself a story about who you are. I'm someone who struggles with lust. I'm someone who has no self-control. I'm someone who always fails, Carl Jung said. I am not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become. You've been living as the person who relapses. Now you need to become the person who doesn't, not the person who resists. The person who doesn't even want to. There's a massive difference. Let me show you what I mean. On day 8, you're going to write out your new identity. Not your goals. Your identity. Here's what I wrote. I am someone who controls my impulses. I am someone who uses my energy for creation, not consumption. I am someone who faces discomfort instead of running from it. I am someone who keeps promises to myself. Notice I didn't write, I want to be or I'm trying to be. I wrote, I am, present tense. Because you're not becoming this person in the future. You're choosing to be this person right now. Plato taught about the concept of forms. The idea that there's a perfect version of everything that exists in the realm of ideas. There's a perfect version of you, the you that you're supposed to be. The you without the addiction, without the shame, without the wasted potential. That version exists right now. Not in the future, right now. And every choice you make either moves you closer to that form or further from it. Days 8 through 10 are about evidence collection. This sounds boring, but it's critical. You're going to prove to yourself that your new identity is real. Every time you make a choice that aligns with your new identity, you write it down. Every time you face an urge and don't give in. Every time you choose the hard thing over the easy thing. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, write it down. I kept a tally in my journal, little tick marks. By day 10, I had 37 pieces of evidence. 37 moments where I acted like the person I said I was. And something crazy happened. I started to believe it. Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. But the reverse is also true. He who acts like a hero eventually becomes one." Now we need to talk about what happens on day 9 or 10 for most people. This is what psychologists call the what the hell effect. You have one slip, one moment of weakness. You peek at something you shouldn't. And your brain says, well, already messed up. Might as well go all the way. And you binge. You throw away all your progress because of one mistake. Albert Ellis, the psychologist who founded rational emotive behavior therapy, taught something powerful. He said your thoughts create your feelings, and your feelings drive your actions. So when you slip, your thought is, I'm a failure. I ruined everything. That thought creates feelings of hopelessness and shame, and those feelings drive the action of a full relapse. But what if you changed the thought? Here's what I did. I created what I call the reset protocol. If I had a slip, I had exactly 60 seconds to execute it. 1. I closed everything immediately. No, just one more. No bargaining. Closed. 2. I stood up and did 10 burpees. Physical movement interrupts the mental pattern. 3. I texted my accountability partner 3 words. Slip, reset, continuing. That's it. No long explanation. No shame spiral. Just acknowledgement and forward movement. The reset protocol saved me twice during the 21 days, once on day 11, once on day 17. Both times I could have spiraled into a full relapse. But I didn't, because I had a plan. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your slip isn't the end. It's information. It's feedback. It's showing you where you're still weak. And now you can strengthen that weakness." Days 11 through 14 are about what I call voluntary discomfort. You're going to intentionally make your life harder. Not because you're punishing yourself, but because you're training your willpower like a muscle. Hobbes, the political philosopher, said that life in nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He was talking about society. But it applies to your internal world too. If you only do what's comfortable, you become weak, soft, unable to handle any resistance. So you add voluntary discomfort. Cold showers every morning. Not because they have magic benefits, but because they suck, and you do them anyway. That's power. Eating meals without your phone, studying without music, walking somewhere instead of driving, small acts of choosing the harder path. Each one is a deposit in your willpower bank. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck had this theory of evolution. He said that if a giraffe stretches its neck to reach higher leaves, its offspring will have longer necks. The theory was wrong scientifically, but metaphorically it's perfect. When you stretch yourself, when you reach for harder things, you change. Not just your actions. Your actual capacity changes. Your brain physically rewires. By day 14, you're at the most dangerous point of the entire 21 days. This is where I relapsed during my first 2 attempts. You feel good, confident. You think you've got this figured out. And that's when your shadow strikes. Because your shadow is patient. It's been watching you, learning your new patterns, waiting for the moment you let your guard down. Machiavelli warns us, never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. Your shadow can't overpower you anymore. You've built too much strength, so it will try to deceive you. It will whisper things like, "You've proven you can do this. One time won't hurt. You're in control now. You can handle it. These thoughts feel like your own thoughts." But they're not. They're the shadow trying to win through deception. This is where the philosophers become your shield. When that voice whispers, you quote Epictetus back to it. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Your shadow is trying to make you think you're being too extreme, too dramatic, that you're overreacting. But you're not. You're being wise. You're protecting your progress. I created a mantra for days 13 and 14. Every time I felt confident, I repeated it. Confidence is dangerous. Vigilance is safety. It kept me humble. It kept me aware. And it got me through the most dangerous days. One more thing about phase 2. You need to understand the concept of keystones. A keystone is the central stone in an arch. Remove it, and the whole structure collapses. Your identity has keystones too. Behaviors that hold everything else together. For me, the keystone was my morning routine. If I woke up and immediately checked my phone, the whole day was doomed. But if I woke up, made my bed, did 20 push-ups, and journaled for 5 minutes, I was unstoppable. Find your keystone. Protect it with your life. Because if your keystone falls, everything else falls with it. Phase 3 is called the Consolidation. Days 15 through 21. This is where you take everything you've learned and make it permanent. Because here's the brutal truth. Most people who make it to day 21 relapse within a week. They think they've won. They think they're cured. And they let their guard down. Don't make this mistake. Sigmund Freud taught us about something called the death drive. The idea that humans have a destructive impulse, a part of us that wants to sabotage our own success. He called it Thanatos, and it's most active right when you're about to break through. Right when you're about to become someone new, your death drive doesn't want you to change, because change means the death of your old self, and your old self is fighting to survive. Day 15 is check-in day. You're going to go back to that journal entry you wrote on day 1, the letter from your shadow, and you're going to read it, but this time you're going to respond. You're going to write a letter back from your conscious self to your shadow, and you're going to tell it something important. I see you. I understand you, but I don't need you anymore. I found a better way. When I wrote this letter, I cried because I realized something. My shadow wasn't my enemy. It was a scared part of me that had been trying to help. It just didn't know how. And now that I had better tools, better strategies, I could let it rest. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." I made my darkness conscious. And in doing so, I set it free. Days 16 through 18 are about stress testing. You're going to intentionally put yourself in situations that would have triggered you before, not to relapse, but to prove that you can handle them. For me, this meant studying late at night in my room, alone, with my laptop, the exact situation that used to be my trigger. But this time, I was different. I had new neural pathways, new responses, new power. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants." For weeks I had been controlling what I did, but I hadn't changed what I wanted. Day 16 was when that shifted. I was in my trigger situation, the urge came, but for the first time it felt weak, distant, like an echo of something that used to matter. I realized I didn't actually want it anymore, not because I was resisting, but because I had changed at a level deeper than behavior. I had changed my desires. This was the ultimate goal. Not to be someone who constantly fights urges, but to be someone who doesn't have strong urges anymore. Jordan Peterson talks about how the goal isn't to eliminate your dragons, it's to integrate them, to transform their energy into something useful. My lust didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became drive, ambition, creative energy. I channeled it into my studies, my goals, my vision for my future. Day 19 is the day you make your final commitment. You're going to write out your code, your personal philosophy, the rules you live by, not rules imposed on you by others. Rules you choose for yourself. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal of his personal philosophy. He called it Meditations. You're going to create your own. Here's what mine looked like. Rule 1. I never compromise my morning routine. Rule 2. I never use my phone in my bedroom. Rule 3. I never make decisions when I'm tired, hungry, or stressed. Rule 4. I treat my future self with respect. Rule 5. I keep promises to myself before I keep promises to others. These weren't suggestions, they were laws, my personal laws. And I followed them like my life depended on it, because it did. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow," but he also said something else. You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. For 21 days, you've been in chaos, fighting yourself, struggling, suffering, but that chaos wasn't meaningless. It was the birth of something new, something better, a dancing star. Days 20 and 21 are about gratitude and future vision. On day 20, you write a letter to yourself. Not to your current self, to your past self, the one who was struggling, the one who was trapped, the one who felt hopeless. You tell that person, we made it. We did what we said we would do. We became who we said we would become. When I wrote this letter on day 20, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride, real pride, not arrogance. Not ego, but genuine self-respect. I had fought the hardest battle a person can fight, the battle with yourself, and I won. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." For the first time in my life, I was free. Day 21 is Future Vision Day. You're not done. You're just beginning. You're going to write out your 90-day plan, your 1-year plan, your 5-year plan. Because the 21 days weren't the goal, They were the foundation. Now you build the rest of your life on that foundation? Here's what I need you to understand. This isn't about perfection. I relapsed on day 73, and again on day 140. But those relapses didn't destroy me because I had the reset protocol. I had my identity. I had my code. Each time I fell, I got up faster. The relapses became less frequent, less powerful, until eventually they stopped happening at all. It's been 8 months now. My grades went from a 2.1 GPA to a 3.7. I got a research position in a lab I thought would never accept me. I started dating someone I actually respect. Not because I'm using her for dopamine, but because I have something real to offer. But more than any of that, I like myself now. I look in the mirror and I see someone I'm proud of. Plato taught that we're all prisoners in a cave. We see shadows on the wall and think they're reality. But they're not, they're just projections. For years I was a prisoner, chained to shadows, thinking that pixels on a screen were real, but they weren't real. They were stealing my reality, my potential, my future. The 21-day system broke those chains, and I walked out of the cave. Now it's your turn. I want you to comment, day 1 complete right now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, right now. Because here's the secret. You'll never feel ready. Readiness is a lie your shadow tells you to keep you stuck. You don't need to be ready. You just need to start. I'm going to check back on these comments. On day 7, on day 14, on day 21, I'm going to be your accountability. Your witness, your proof that this is possible. But you have to take the first step. You have to make the choice. Carl Jung said it best. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So what do you choose? Do you choose to stay in the cave? To keep living as a slave to your impulses? To keep wasting your potential on shadows? Or do you choose freedom? Do you choose power? Do you choose to become the person you know you're capable of being? The answer is in your hands. Day 1 starts now. I'll see you in the comments. Let's walk out of this cave together.